Okay. According to the message that just popped up, we're live streaming, so let's go. I think we have at least a quorum. So, as I said, Ralph's traveling and may or may not make it. So let's kick it off. This is the Hideout Utah Town Council regular meeting of January 12th, 2023. I've called the meeting to order and remind everyone that there is no anchor site for this meeting for all the usual reasons. There's in your packet, there's a letter that you can see that supports the decision for no anchor site. Take roll. Chris Beyer.
I'm here.
Thank you. Bob Nadelberg.
Here.
Carol Hazelton. Carol.
I'm here.
There you are. Thank you. Nice to see you. And Sherry Jacobs.
Here.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is an update on Golden Eagle. Tim, I know you're on. Can you give us a brief update around any progress? I think they're still waiting on the hookups on the power on the water up there.
Yeah, well, yeah. So they actually got the power to it. They had a failure in one of the fuses, but they got those corrected, I think, yesterday. We've been up and verified that it works. They have to still go and get with the state of Utah to get their operating permit, and then the pump house will be ready to go.
Okay. So they're getting close, but they still haven't quite got it
there. Yeah, that's
Jim,
the thing about the juice stuff, but they're working on it, and so we do appreciate that for sure.
Okay.
Tim, are there any updates to the roads? Has there been any improvement to Golden Eagle Road or anything else?
Yeah, good question. No, the road still hasn't been done. They are snow plowing up there, but the main road, that dirt road portion, is still you can't even. It looks like some of our snowbanks that we have in Hideout. So there hasn't been anything done with that, but they're still working again, like I say, and doing a good job. So hopefully we can get it all resolved really quickly. And the pump house, like I said, that was a big thing to get all that stuff taken care of and the fuses in. They just have to go and get their approved date and go from there.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Any questions from council on Golden Eagle? What you heard, tomorrow there's a ruling on with the courts tomorrow. Polly, have you got the link data? Have you sent that out yet? Polly? Are you guys hearing me? Anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, that was my fault. I had it on like a double mute. It's harder to undo. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
You were going to send the because I guess it's a virtual. There's if the council wanted to listen to her ruling, there a way to you were going to.
Yes, I'll send that out. I'll send that out tonight.
Okay. Thank you. What time is she supposed to be talking about all this tomorrow?
8:30 a.m.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, Polly. Item for public input. Okay, Rachel. I think you should be able to unmute, Rachel. You haven't done it, but it says you can. There you go.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that's Rachel or Brian, but yeah.
Yeah, this is Brian Stealth under Rachel.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, can we talk a little bit about the issues we've had with snow plowing this year and maybe some solutions?
Sure you can, Brian. Let's tee up what your concerns
Well,
are.
I noticed we bought a snow blower, I guess a little skidder with a snow blower on it. I saw someone going around. I talked to them. They were really struggling because I think it was a little late for that machine. It's not that heavy duty a machine. And he was the guy that was running it was super struggling to get maybe 1/3 the width of the snow blower to actually blow, right? It was because the snow had hardened so much from the softening and the melting, right?
Mhm.
So it's a good machine, but I think maybe it needs to be employed earlier when the snow is softer. That's one thought. Or maybe we need a bigger blower. The other thing is, I mentioned this to Dan last year. And once again, slush has been plowed into my driveway, and then it freezes overnight. I had to use an ice pick basically to break it up to even get out of the driveway. So when there's only an inch or two of snow or it's just slush, plow it away from the driveways. You can plow it all the way across the street. It's not that big a deal, right?
It is, Brian. I'm sorry. It is a big deal. These guys have to keep moving. We can't plow it into the middle of the road. We gotta clear the road. We gotta push it to the sides. That's the standard everywhere in the state. It is what it is. I know it's awful. I have the same 3-foot berm that everybody else has. I have the same junk that everybody else has. We all have to clear it. It is how it works. There's just no way.
I understand the snow. I'm just saying it's the slush that turns to ice. That's the most dangerous stuff. It seems to me we make 2 passes on the road. We could just make 2 passes passing the same way. I mean, I don't understand why that's an issue, but at least on the side streets, we only have 1 lane anyway.
Well, that's why we're trying to use the snow thrower to cut it back.
Yeah, I understand.
So let me talk about the snow stuff for a minute. We have 4 trucks. They're all 2,500 pickup trucks or 250s, depending. They're actually 250s because they're Fords. They are all 4-wheel drive. We have invested in chains, and the salters on the back add weight, but the chains aren't here yet because, like everything else, supply chain issues. At least I don't think they're here. Are they here yet, Tim?
Monday, we'll be getting him.
Okay, so we'll have them hopefully before the end of the next set of snowstorms. That'll give us better traction. We've got 2 pieces of equipment. One's a skid steer, and one's a mini excavator that we can put the snow blower on and try and cut the banks back. When it's snowing, we have 4 people in Public Works driving, and we're driving 24 hours. These guys are working, 12-hour shifts, and so 2 and 2. When we have the snows as heavy as they've been, when we have the 2 feet and 3 feet kind of snowfalls, we actually have to run 2 plows behind, 1 plow behind the other, because it sloughs off and doesn't really clear the road. So the guy behind, just like you see him going down the highway, where they're staggered, we have to do that. So that reduces the speed in which they can get through the town. It makes cleaning, makes it harder because, they have to follow one another instead of being able to work separate parts of the town. When the snowing is continuously and as hard as it has been, we are unable on the day shift to come around and do the cutting back that you're suggesting, Brian. I don't disagree with you. If the snow ended, the next day we could come through and clean up and cut back. But if it's still snowing, we're just driving plows. And then, as you say, the banks harden up and it gets to be a challenge. So, Tim and I and the council actually at our working session last Thursday talked about, what the needs are for additional equipment. Tim's working on that and it's not going to help us this winter because that stuff is long lead time. And it also costs money. So, but we're putting that together to see if we can upgrade, get some heavier equipment. The other thing is trying to get more employees, which had an open hiring opportunity posted for months, and we're just not able to get anyone. So that's another problem. People don't want to do this work. They don't want to work at night. They don't want to, they don't want to work whatever, but we're not able to get. So we're looking at other ideas around how to get additional public works employees. We need at least one and probably two. But we've had an open request for, we had a couple of people apply and then they got opportunities to do other things. So we're still on the search for that. So it's.
I was going to say, this is no dispersion on the folks. I know they're.
No, I know it's not, Brian. I know. Believe me, we're.
I was going to say, I hope we can hire more people, but it sounds like you've been trying to do that as a problem.
I mean, we are. We're trying hard to, and we're up to a pretty significant amount of money. We're not offering them $18. Let me tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I don't. We got to keep working on it, and Tim and the team and Dan have got to roll up their sleeves and figure out what else we can do, or how do we attack this differently. Tim and I were supposed to have a call today, but I was delinquent in not being available, and I apologize, Tim, for that. I went skiing. My bad.
Don't worry, we can meet tomorrow.
Yep. Anyway, so we're trying to find more people, Brian. We're trying to, we're improving the traction on the trucks. We've got, more equipment on order. I think is, cutting back, especially because it's going to get cold again in the next few days. I don't know how well we're going to be able to cut those banks back. I know we're down to half a road. And we got to figure out how to get that back. As the town is not designed particularly well for having space to eliminate snow, move snow. In places like Rustler where there's high vertical walls on the sides of the road, there's no place to throw it.
Right.
So, in this kind of winter, what we're seeing here, we're starting to have to think about loading it and hauling it out, which is tedious and expensive. So we're trying everything, but it's we still got 3 more months of agony, I'm afraid. The way at least the way the weather forecast is projected. So I'm with you, and we want to get some additional equipment, and we'll be putting that in the budget. We'll be looking for mechanisms to fund it, and see what grants are available as well, besides just asking the taxpayers to suck it up. But we're already looking at
I'll offer my help for ideas if you need help with grants, whatever.
Yeah.
I'll make one observation, which you guys are probably well aware of. Because Park City Landscape came by here yesterday, day before, I forget which, and there was about 6 inches of snow on the road, and they were going up to plow somebody's driveway, private. And fortunately, the guy has a Kubota tractor, 4-wheel drive tractor with a snowblower on the front and a rake blade on the back. He just lowered his snowblower down. He blew the street out for us. that sucker has a lot of power. So that might be something you look at if you want to upgrade.
Yeah, that's great, Brian. If you can do a little search for what you saw.
Yeah,
Send
I'll ask Park City Landscape what they use. Yeah,
send the link to.
and he was blowing going uphill on North Shoreline Court, which is fairly steep. So
Okay.
I was
Oh
impressed.
yeah,
with
I
it.
mean I've
It
seen
flew-
some of those.
He was,
little.
flipping the chute around and flying at 50 feet.
Well, then that may be a good next toy, for lack of better terminology.
So
yeah, if
Mayor, this is Chris.
Yeah.
Brian brings up a good point. I just don't think we have the right equipment. I know exactly what you saw, Brian, because I actually saw him drive by today also with that same piece of equipment. I don't think we have the right equipment. And are you saying, Mayor, that there's no way we can get the right equipment this winter?
I don't, depending on what it is, I don't know what the lead times are on these, Chris, but typically they're not quick.
Oh, so you haven't shopped for it yet, is what have
Well,
you identified?
Tim's looking for, Tim's looked at some equipment, but not this particular thing that Brian just described.
Okay, Tim, what equipment are you currently looking at for this?
Well, same scenario as Park City Landscape. Again, I think they do a good job, but they cause a lot of problems for us also because they're putting snow in some areas that make it hard for us to get around. But same type of little thing, small tractors, a big tractor, we probably need 2 of those. But to be honest, you upwards of 85,000 for both. And that's just something we don't have budgeted.
Well, I think we need to understand what you think
Tim,
correct
I
equipment
guess,
is, so that we have a listing of what the correct equipment should be, and then we can figure out the money once we know what that correct equipment should be.
Yep, me and Dan we know what we want. We've got it. We figured it out. And it's just a matter of sitting down with everyone. And I think priority number 1, that's kind of what we talked about with the little mini, is we need to get a trailer first, kind of move that around to different areas. I was out clearing it, making shoreline wider, personally myself, last week. So, but we need a trailer, a dump trailer to kind of get that going. And then you're looking probably for the little small one that they had, you're looking at a new one, and good luck finding a used one because we can't find one. But those used ones new ones are going. The little one that you saw exactly from what Park City Landscape was, that's running at about 35,000. The bigger one that we kind of want to get to, that can really move a lot of snow, has an enclosed cab for our guys, for a backhoe attachment for winter to keep warm in the middle of the night. You're looking at 55,000 for that. So
Okay, that's fine. Look, we're not waiting for the accident, right? We're not
No.
waiting for some kind of head-on collision because the road's too narrow and somebody can't stop because it's all icy. We're not waiting for that, right? We're actually looking at
I
equipment.
agree,
now.
Chris.
Yeah,
Bring me the requisition.
I have a question, if possible. What about, for this season, is it somewhere we can rent this equipment? Because I worry about emergencies, like some of these driveways, you can't get a fire truck in, like if it's a really long driveway, or an ambulance. So I just worry about those kinds of emergencies. And I know my contractor rented some equipment down in Salt Lake to clear out snow on our lot, to get a flatbed in there. And he said there was equipment in Salt Lake, not in Park City. So what's the possibility of renting it while we need it?
It's the same type of scenario. Yeah, we can rent stuff, but we need stuff for a longer term. So most of these people that will rent, they'll rent it for the cleanup purposes, right? We need it when it's falling. So we need to have a long-term rental, and companies aren't willing to do long-term rentals with it.
Well, I think, Tim, we're talking about dual streams here. Okay, bring me the requisition.
Yep.
And we'll find the money because we need to have it. All right, and there's a lead time on that. In the meantime, let's rent. Let's find out what it takes to rent and get in here and start getting the right equipment to clean up. I mean, we only have a few days between storms, so let's if we have to rent for 3 weeks or whatever, a week, and then give it back. I don't know. Find out what we can do to get something, and if we have to trailer it up from Salt Lake, we'll trailer it up from Salt Lake.
No worries. And that was part of the stuff I want to talk about today, but we can
Yeah.
definitely do. We have some ideas, so we'll definitely get in touch with you tomorrow, Mayor.
So I mean, we'll find the money. I'll take it off of something else. So,
Thank you, Mayor. I think that's the right answer. We need short-term cleanup and when we need that long-term, having the correct equipment for when the snow's actually falling.
so Tim, put a plan together for that. Let's get that kicked off next week and see what we can come up with.
Yep, I already have one for you, so we're ready
Okay,
to go.
good. All right, then we'll sit down and chat tomorrow and go through it. Okay. Good, thank you. Let me see. Looking for. We have Brian. Sorry, is that it, Brian?
That's all I wanted. Yes, sorry.
Okay. Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks for your interest in support and trying to think through some stuff. By all means, I'm gonna chat with Tim tomorrow. You can, we can get you on the phone as well at some point and see if we have any other thoughts before we, so we will go get some stuff that allow us to do what we need to do a little bit better than we can. This is a special winter, no doubt about it. Okay, Damien.
Hello. I know this is going to sound silly, but so I actually have a Kubota tractor I'm not using, that's only a year old down in San Diego that I could let you guys use for this winter if you want me to bring it up. I don't have the snow blower.
Thank you, Damien. That's a very generous offer. If you just let Tim know what the specs of the equipment, we'll see. Obviously, I don't want you to have to drive it up there and do all that. But if we can't get what we want to get quickly, then we may have to. We may take you up on your offer. Typically, the attachments are typically available quicker than the actual unit itself. So.
Yep.
And,
Ready. I'll talk to Tim.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's very generous of you. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to close public input. We'll go on the agenda items. The first one we had on here was, because we talked about this last week, was the thought process around additional nightly rentals in Deer Springs. That's really the only other area in town that we have the ability to consider. I don't know. I guess, Thomas, my view is we probably should put a proposal together before we talk about this. I think we're look at the map and see what, because we've said we want to keep them on the outskirts and along the major routes and so forth. Maybe we should defer this till next month when you can pull up a Deer Springs set of drawings and we can look at some of the areas and make some decisions, or at least think about making some decisions. What does the council think?
I can do that. I do have a map included in the report. If you
Oh, you do?
discuss
Okay.
this tonight, and it's just if you go to the third page, you can see that area. It's a little bit small, so you gotta zoom in. You can see that area is the only section of Deer Springs that is on the west side of Jordan L. Parkway. And I think that based on our discussion at the last meeting, that was important to the council. And I kind of outlined that in the report as well, that one, if we were going to consider allowing it, it would be in an area that's not terribly integrated into existing neighborhoods. It would be on the other side of that highway. It would kind of be maybe an overlay district to allow nightly rentals, but not connected or interwoven within the community. As you do know, there are a few nightly rentals in Deer Springs Phase 1 as the result of a plat note that had been put on to that plat very, very early on. And Claim also had an agreement pursuant to their MDA and their HOA CCNRs to allow nightly rentals, but those are the only two. Since then, the code currently does not allow nightly rentals, period. And so I think at our discussion, this was at least, you know, as the current town boundary exists right now, I think this was the only area that I think most of you, and again, speak up if I'm incorrect, that most of you thought, okay, that's a little separate. Across Jordanelle Parkway, it feels a little separate, unique. There's nothing around it. So this would be, I think, the only area that I would recommend that we even consider it for if you decide to do nightly rentals.
Well, hey, this is Ralph. I joined a little late here in New York, so hope you can you hear me, Phil?
We can, Ralph. I was just gonna
Okay.
jump in and I forgot to say that between topics that.
Yeah,
you were on,
no
so I
problem.
apologize.
Sorry, guys. It's
Alicia, if you
wait-
capture that Ralph is here and has been since.
about 3 minutes after.
Okay.
So, you know, hey, Thomas, I read the doc and some of the analysis. I thought it was really good. But I have concerns that we, you know, I see it both ways, you know, and it's not just the appendage at Deer Springs. It's, you know, what do we do here? And I think, you know, part of the information you included in the packet was thorough and had a lot of good recommendations. But are we considering that just for this appendage at Deer Springs, this phase 8, or was that really addressing the larger picture? I thought it was a larger picture. No?
Well, it's both and. It is both that phase 8. Should you all believe that that is an appropriate location for nightly rentals, and at this point, I would not recommend any other areas within the community for nightly rentals. I think everything else is so integrated that it could be quite a disturbance to other neighbors who have already established their neighborhood. Actually, Mayor, if you don't mind, if you go down just a little further, there's the townwide zoning map, and you can see one more down. You can see on the townwide zoning map, the area in beige is the RSPI area, the master HOA. So all of that beige area is already off limits. The only places that you could consider nightly rentals are Claim, Deer Waters, Lakeview, and up here in Deer Springs. You certainly have the affordable housing, but
Deer Waters is under the master HOA.
Deer Waters is?
Yep.
Okay,
That
so
was part of their approval.
that's right. The boundary didn't go there, but the MDA that they negotiated with the town did. You're right. So good point. So really, it's only Claim. Claim already has an allowance for nightly rentals. Lakeview is single family housing. It wouldn't be a good recommendation there. Deer Waters is off limits. That correction is noted. And then the only other area would be Deer Springs, but integrating within Deer Springs phases 1 through 7, you know, that's intended to grow as a neighborhood, as a residential neighborhood. Only this phase on the west side of Jordanelle would be disparate. And so those would be the only areas you can even allow nightly rentals because the master HOA doesn't allow it. So I think that this would be probably the trial nightly rental district. If there were future annexations and if it made sense, I think that some of the recommendations in here toward the very end of the report, I noted some criteria that I think would be important to incorporate into an ordinance. But yes, then it would apply to future ones, but I can't think of anywhere within the community now that you may want it. The Boulders, the Salzman property may be down the road. We just don't know how that's going to be master planned, but I can't think of any other area in outside of the MDA that you would want that right now.
I kind of agree. So, but I was just kind of wondering what your analysis covered. And because it certainly encompasses some things that could be applied to a bigger picture, even to an annexation by the thought process of that, of those items. So, in
Yeah.
the context of this meeting, are we just looking at, so we're back to phase 8, just looking at a phase 8. And the pieces of data that I don't think we have that I feel comfortable with is, good, there's some good cash flow, but not a lot, so we get maybe 105,000 max a year, in the best case scenario over 40 years, and who knows how that's going to go. The big question I have in any of this,
Yeah.
I think that was there were a couple of different analysis in scenario 1 and 2, but in any case, what is the impact in terms of town value? So here's my view on this, and we already know that 2/3 of the town surveyed weren't in favor of this, but from a dollars and cents standpoint. So does my property go up in value or down? So here's my point. If I save $1,000 a year in taxes, or 500, I don't think we'd save, 1,000 per property. But that's just an estimate. But if my property value goes down 200,000 over that course of time, I've served myself no benefit nor the town. So now if I can add money to our budget and the value of our town goes up, that's a good thing. But I haven't seen that analysis and data to support either one, just the cash flow analysis. And I have to like in anything, you have to discount cash flow analysis. You almost have to discount everything. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on the numbers and the fact that, the town already not voted, but it certainly gave us data points when we did the general plan, and they gave us data points in the survey, which were negative.
Can I just explain something, Ralph? So it doesn't matter if homes increase in value or decrease in value, the bottom line for the town is the same. That's how the Utah taxing requirements are. So unless there's what's called new growth, but if you have an existing house and the value goes up, then your tax rate goes down, and the town can only collect the same amount every year. So
yeah, Polly, I get that. Totally get
okay.
it. Yeah, this has nothing to do with the tax revenue rate or benefit going down or up. This has to do with the town values. Yeah, the tax rate is going to be redone based upon the new town values, so to speak, and our budget. So that's always a divisible number. But what I'm talking about is, can nightly rentals add value to the property values in our town or subtract? And so the net, my proposition would be, we'd certainly like to see our homes appreciate, at the same time, maybe we're getting a potential, revenue stream that reduces our taxes. But number one thing is, the value of our town, the value of our homes. So
Well,
anyway, that's my point.
I think, Ralph, that's a really hard question to answer. So if we were to support this project on the phase 8, which is across the Jordanelle Parkway, right? How is that going to affect your home or my home in Hideout Canyon over here? And I don't know that it does at all.
It may not, and because this is
I don't know how you measure that. I don't know how you decide if it does or it doesn't.
I can try to help you there from a real estate perspective,
Okay.
if you want. I think that having small pockets of the nightly rentals, such as this claim, Deer Springs, I don't think people, when they're coming to buy a home here, if they're looking at your home or mayor's home, are thinking, oh my God, there's nightly rentals 2 miles away in town. I don't think it's going to affect anyone's property value. Now, if you were to suddenly start allowing nightly rentals in the middle of Rustler, then that would affect your value too, Ralph. But I don't think that small pockets that are not attached to the areas that are where it's not allowed and people bought there for that specific reason, I think people would be very upset all of a sudden if you put nightly rentals in the middle of the neighborhoods that they bought in where they didn't expect it. But if they're not attached to them, I don't think it's going to have any effect on the value of the town as a whole. Some people like nightly rentals, and people will buy here because of that. And they'll say, I want to live in that area because I can now rent my home out, where they wouldn't have looked at Hideout at all before. So I think you can look at it both ways. And I think if you were to survey the town again and say, hey, we aren't going to put nightly rentals in where you are, but what if we put them all the way over here, 2 miles away from you or a mile away from you? I think a lot more people would be okay with that. But I do think we should limit it, and it shouldn't be nightly. I think it should be maybe weekly, so that you don't get as much transient traffic. That's just my opinion. So,
Yeah, and Sherry, I think you know, obviously you're close to the real estate market. What I heard through all your conversation was you think, do we have any data to support this, either from a comparative standpoint, say with what another town may have done, or two towns kinds of things? Do we have any,
it's
you know?
tough because most of them nightly rent, like Park City, they're mixed in so much in there that you might have one subdivision in a neighborhood that allows it and one that doesn't. And a lot of people buy there specifically to be able to rent out their homes. So I think it would be impossible to have any kind of data on that. I know Skyridge is selling really well and they allow nightly rentals. But people buy and hide. There are people that buy and hide out that don't really want them. And then they can buy in the other areas, Deer Waters, Rustler, Shoreline. There's plenty of places for them to buy and hide out that don't allow them. But it's nice to have a couple areas that do for those people that do want it. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. I really don't.
Yeah, but I tell you what, I'm obviously leaning against it for the fact that 2/3 of our town gave us input saying they don't want it. I don't think.
What if you asked, I mean, you could probably ask that question. And again, if you explain to people, we're not changing the current neighborhoods where you live. I think the question of asking a broad question like, do you want nightly rentals? I would say no, because I don't want them next door to my house. But if I knew it wasn't going to be next door to my house, but it was going to be across the highway all the way at the other end of town for people that wanted them down there, it wouldn't bother me. So I think we need to ask that question again and explain it a little better.
Well, and don't forget, does that set a precedent? Do people interpret that as setting a precedent? Can we say in our survey that we will never have nightly rentals outside of phase 8 and phase 1 of Deer
No,
Springs?
we can't.
Yeah, we can't. Exactly. That's my point. So
No, but you can say it's not going to be in the areas that are already, like, it's not going to be where the master HOA is. So it's not going to be in areas that are already built and zoned, but we could annex lands that wants it, that might not be real close to those areas at all.
So again, I mean, all right, thanks, Sherry, and thanks, Ralph. So here's the thoughts, guys. We're going to have the opportunity to, as a council, to vote on whether or not to allow if this in phase 8, as Thomas pointed out here. The expectation is that project's going to come forward through planning commission and to council at some point with that desire written into or requested for the master development agreement. So we'll have the choice to vote on that, and the council majority will make that decision. But we also talked on last Friday that we should think strongly about other ways to do it because it does generate some revenue. And as we pointed out in our session, that we need to get better at it. So let's, keep that in, I think Ralph brings up good points. I think Sherry brings up good points. So we're not gonna make that call tonight. We don't have a project in front of us yet, but I appreciate what Thomas has done in pulling the documents together and the thinking process. And let's soak on it because it's going to come to us.
So Mayor, this is Chris. So are we going to step through Thomas's document because it's in the packet?
We're not skipping through it. What?
I said step through it, right?
We
Because
can if you want to. All right. All right. Go ahead, Thomas.
and then let me just add one more thing. If you don't mind, before Thomas gets a chance to walk through it. One of the considerations, and this is for Sherry and Ralph, because I listened carefully to what you guys were saying. One of the things that I have concerns with when it comes to nightly rentals is that, say, for example, that project that's across the Jordanelle Parkway, that's a great spot, right? For more affordable housing, smaller units. We might actually be able to have people live there full time, whether they're renting or owning is immaterial, right? But if those go into a nightly rental pool, whether it's nightly, weekly, whatever, then that essentially removes those units from full-time residents who could be living and working in the area, work in Park City. It essentially removes those units because, people buy them and then put them on Airbnb rather than maybe buy them and rent them out long-term to somebody who lives and works in the community. So I just wanted to express that as one of my real concerns about nightly rentals is that Hideout's not going to solve the problem that Park City created, but we should not continue to contribute to it. Not having enough smaller units that are more affordable for people to live and work locally.
Mhm.
I don't think Deer Springs is planning to build that kind of property, though. Maybe we can ask them to do some of it that way and not allow nightly rentals in those areas. But if they're building multi-million-dollar townhomes, then they're not going to be affordable. So it would be up to Deer Springs on what they're building or what their plan says.
I was looking at those cottages, and I think Thomas is going to talk to us a little bit about those cottages. So like a cottage home is kind of a really nice alternative. And I know we had talked about some of those as far as if the annexation of the Richardson Flat acreage were to end up in our favor. We negotiated for those kinds of cottage homes there as well, because we are trying to encourage people to own or rent, but live here and work here.
Yeah, we did. You're right. We did push hard for that in the Richardson Flat annexation to get smaller units that could be more affordable, even if they're not deed restricted. They could be more affordable to the average kind of or median income household. You're right. And so, it's interesting just to refresh everybody's memory. So when Nate came in to the planning commission, he didn't come into the council. He came in with a concept plan for this. And we have pushed him in the past to look at smaller units that could be more affordable, cottage units, and he's really taken a liking to the idea. This proposal kind of came in as a bit of a surprise with the nightly rental component when it came into the planning commission as a concept plan. The challenge we are in is he is vested with, I think, 34 or 38 townhouse units up there. And that's an approval he's got from a number of years ago. And so in an attempt to negotiate to diversify product, he was willing to come in with the cottage concept, and he asked for the nightly rentals. When it went to the planning commission, they said, we can't we don't allow nightly rentals yet, but from a concept, we really like what you're doing. We would expand the community center. We asked him to incorporate some retail there because it's on Jordan L. Parkway, and look at getting, maybe 1, 2, or 3 affordable units, maybe above that community center or that proposed retail, that commercial area. So it was a little bit of a give and a get. But we didn't have much negotiating power because he already has the right for the density and the right to do the townhouses. One of the things I'm sitting here thinking about as we have this discussion is, if we did decide to maybe move forward and start to look at preparing an ordinance and identifying a location for nightly rentals, if we were to do it with Nate, maybe there's an opportunity, because this would change his MDA, his master development agreement with the town. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, let's look at swapping some of the townhouses in phases 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the main area for maybe some cottage development that would be a little bit more, how shall I say, maybe available to middle income homeowners, or just slightly above that, right? Maybe that's an opportunity. It diversifies product on the neighborhood side. That's not a nightly rental side. It'd be the east side of Jordan L. Parkway. But we have that opportunity because this particular site is part of Deer Springs, and Nate is the one doing the entire project. So that could be something that we look at as well.
Could I
And
make
Nate-
a comment about regulation of nightly rentals? From it was on KPCW this morning. They were talking about it, and I believe there was also an article in the Park Record about it, that I believe in Utah that you have to have a business license for nightly rentals. You have to regulate them. You have a number of rules and regs that that the owner has to post for the tenants who use them. Who's going to handle all the regulation of that? I mean, does that add another staff member to Hideout, or who controls that?
So legally, that's not required, but that's what a lot of places do. But there's no state law that requires all those things. Those are all things that towns or cities tend to do in order to try to make nightly rentals better run. If we do have any kind of additional requirements, I mean, some of those could be recouped in the business license fee because they would be related directly to the license. But I don't see, based on the numbers or anything that we've asked for, I mean, we require a property management company generally. So, or that's what's, if you look at Thomas, if you go down, or
You'll
Alicia,
scroll down one page, Mayor, you'll get to what Polly's talking about. Yeah, keep going just a little further, right, to town action today. Go a little further, and you can see some of the changes that were made to accommodate claim and Deer Springs 1.
right. So if you can see, we require a property management company that would take care of, to make sure that we have a professional that is going to manage these. So I don't think that it would, I mean, it's a good point, and nightly rentals do require regulation, but those regulations are what we want them to be. They're not state code required.
So the state doesn't really require anything from nightly rentals?
No, I mean, they got lobbied really hard, and the only thing that's really in the state code about nightly rentals is that you cannot fine people or enforce against them just because they list on one of the websites like Airbnb. So if we don't allow nightly rentals and somebody puts their home up on Airbnb in an area where it's prohibited, we can't enforce against them just because they put it on Airbnb. You need additional evidence, but that's the only thing in the state code that addresses nightly rentals.
Hey, Thomas, in the case of phase 8, or the whole Deer Springs phases, Nate all, Nate was banding about some commercial in there, remember? That are we getting that in conjunction with what he wants for the nightly rentals? I mean, what are we, what
Yeah,
is the town
we
net
pushed-
out of this? So-
Guys, we don't have a project yet. We shouldn't be trying to
Oh, okay,
guess what's been brought in front of us.
He,
It hasn't brought to us.
well, he
Go ahead.
did submit a concept plan to the planning commission. It was just a concept plan for initial review, and his initial thoughts were just the workforce cottages. We pushed hard on that to say that there needed to be some sort of community center, community amenities. There needed to be a commercial component, maybe some workforce housing above that commercial component. And ultimately, his concept plan did morph and did cover those items. So he did incorporate that. The details of that have not been resolved yet. There's been no revision to that subdivision, that phase 8, any of that. It was a concept plan, but he did agree to commercial development, maybe a couple of affordable units above, but that's still, all of that is still to be finalized.
okay. And so, it goes back to what you initially said. Is this focused on, phase 8, or is it focused on the larger picture? And since we haven't received any firm proposal, or do we, Mayor, we don't have a firm proposal, or what?
Just
No,
a concept plan to planning commission that outlined what I put on the first page here, the number of units, some commercial development, and the affordable. That was what he generally proposed. You could see there are 35 cottage units, a neighborhood commercial site, a pool, fire pit, etc. And then we also discussed at that meeting the inclusion of a couple of affordable units. That was not put on the concept plan, but it was generally, he gave a head nod to it. I mean, we're in the driver's seat. If you were to consider a nightly rental district in this area, I would think that would be a fair requirement.
Okay, that's good. But we're not there in negotiation at this point quite yet.
We're not. You all at the meeting in November just gave Nate a head nod that nightly rental did make some sense in this area. You would consider it, and then the request by council was that that I come back with a little bit of research, and at the very end of this report, I've outlined some criteria, some conditions that if you were to move forward, I think would be appropriate for us to consider if we were to create a district, an overlay district to allow nightly rentals in phase 8 in this example, and criteria to ensure the quality of that nightly rental neighborhood.
That's
So
good.
Thomas,
Thank you,
we're
Thomas.
still hoping that, if you can clear the whole document, as Chris has requested a while back. Just kind of,
Sure. So I'll kind of run through it. We've kind of addressed some. So this was, I think, the impetus. The bullet points here outline the Deer Springs Phase 8 proposal. The second section there just notes that we do have some nightly rentals in claim, and we do have some nightly rentals. If you go to the second page, Mayor, we do have some also in Deer Springs Phase 1 as a result of a plat note that was put on very, very early on.
Right.
Subsequent phases in Deer Springs do not allow for nightly rentals. So Deer Springs 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 will not allow for nightly rentals. Again, the Master Association, the Master HOA does not allow nightly rentals. Town action to date, Polly outlined some of the ordinance revisions, inclusions that you all made in September of 22 to address the nightly rentals that we do have, just ensuring that they're managed by a company, that you have, that they have a license requirement so that you, the town, have some authority over them. If you go to the next page, again, this just walks through the specific geography for phase 8. If you scroll to the next page, we walk through this map as well. The beige area, the Master HOA Association does not allow for nightly rentals. And so the next page pointed out, Ralph walked through this a little bit, just as a general question, 35,000 feet. When asked, 66%, 2/3 of the town said no to nightly rentals. And I think Sherry outlined it well, and Chris as well. You know, if it's next to you in an established neighborhood, you probably are not going to be in favor of them. You scroll to the next page. This is where, you know, I just did a little bit of research with regard to potential criteria if we were to consider nightly rentals in this location. You know, again, managed by a professional management company, require a business license, ensure that there are some fees associated with that, maybe limit them to a size, a maximum size. Maybe we don't want 5,000 square foot houses becoming nightly rentals. Not that that's what's being proposed for phase 8, but just to, again, protect, you know, kind of potential for creep in the future. Prevent party houses. Some communities recommend adopting a formal permit requirement, the number of people that are allowed in the property, a three strikes rule if there are local government or police services called. Number 6, implement a formal permit limiting the number of motor vehicles that can be on site. Sometimes people convene in a nightly rental from all over the country, and they each have an automobile, causing pretty serious issues, especially here, given our snow issues now, especially this year, right? Good neighbor brochure, maybe that's something that we create so that they understand these are trash nights. These are, you know, recycling nights when you put your bins out. Consider a minimum period of a week, that was mentioned earlier, instead of just daily in-out nightly rentals. Require a safety inspection of the property, and then a fine structure to ensure that landlords comply with the nightly rental ordinance. And you know, the last thing I noted there is, I don't know if this changes the complexion of a development, but you know, incorporate maybe a 5-year timeline to reassess how well did this particular neighborhood work. No developer would want to see that, but it is an option. Some communities have exercised it. So those were just some thoughts and some criteria that I had put together, that I had researched. The attachment here was submitted by Nate. This was actually submitted, I think Nate, I think, I don't know if Jan's on, I think that maybe the mayor and Jan, I think you guys had requested somewhat of an analysis when he was asking about nightly rentals early on in the main portion of Deer Springs. This is that analysis. So this didn't speak specifically to phase 8. This was kind of just a general analysis for nightly rentals in townhouses. Some of these numbers, I mean, it looks like maybe.
I mean, you have to look at this as, because this is in the MIDA project area, so.
That's right. That's true.
It kind
So
of
the numbers are a little
creates
different.
some different challenges if you're going to consider it here in addition. So that would require, you know, again, part of a renegotiation with potentially even MIDA around how the nightly rental tax gets managed. Because that's, you know, that's property tax, not a nightly rental tax in that section there.
And that's really the extent of the report. I can answer any questions or go into any level of detail or answer specifics, but that was kind of the overview based on your request for an update post the November meeting.
Well, thank you, Thomas.
Hey, Thomas. Oh, sorry,
Go
go ahead. Just a quick question on a comment you made in here about perhaps doing a nightly rental district that might be time limited and it reevaluated after, say, 5 years. Can we do that?
I don't know. Polly might know the answer to that question. I know other jurisdictions have done that. I don't know if they've been in Utah. I don't know. I don't know if we can do that. Can we, Polly? It's a temporary use. Could we put a time restriction?
I think it's whether legally you can do it, probably, but it's very hard to take away something once you've given it.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
And there's a real chance in this case, Nate may not take the bait. He might say, I'm just going to build townhouses. That's what I have a right to do, right? Because that might be too much of an unknown.
And I'm also worried that if, as a small city, we tried to exercise that right, and then we'd end up getting the attention of the state legislature, and then they would pass a law that doesn't allow us to do that, right? I would be worried about that.
Yep, that's a
Since
fair.
it would restrict, property owners' ability to use their property.
I mean,
We
I
need
think-
to change the interlocal agreement with MITA for it to make financial sense.
I think,
Right.
the other elements in Thomas's list, are mechanisms for control. I mean, if we were to allow it, we're allowing it because we are interested in the potential revenue. And therefore, that's the driver. And but we want to make sure is there are mechanisms for control so that we don't have the things that occasionally happen. Like the party houses and whatnot. And
That's
so
right. You would,
if we do our analysis, I mean, and we have a relationship with the sheriff's department. We can, they will happily, work with us to give us a sense of the kinds of calls they get, et cetera, so that we can design language for control purposes and mechanisms. So I don't know that having a expiration date is necessarily required versus the three strike rules and things like that. I mean, if we have other mechanisms that if you keep having issues, then you're either then you don't get to do this anymore. That pretty much solves that problem for that particular unit.
right. If you revoke the
So-
license, you're right. You've effectively done the same thing. So we would want to make sure that the ordinance was the code language included, those criteria. It was solid. It was detailed to the advantage of the town.
Right, exactly. So I think there's workarounds besides having a clause that might come back and bite us.
Right. I agree.
Okay, any other comments on, more food for thought? Because as I mentioned, there's a good chance we're going to see this come forward. So
Yeah, Nate has reached out to me a couple of times over the past week, and he's kind of ready to begin pushing his project into the planning commission public hearing process. He knows that not yet are nightly rentals allowed, but he knows that it is something that is being considered. So we'll probably see something from him in the next month or so.
Yeah, and Thomas, the more information we get, I think the better. I as my principle is stay flexible on these things, and if it is in the right area, yeah, like we were talking about across the highway, the boulders as an example, or an annexation. But I think I'd like to see more information. I know that I thought you did a really good job on the controls, and maybe it was just a little bit overboard on the 5-year thing, but it was.
I was
cool
going
that
out on a limb. I was just, hey, can we? I don't know. I put it in there.
Yeah, can't blame me for that. You're out there looking after our butts. But I would like some more data. I'm just a information data person. I don't feel like I've got enough to know, what other communities and personally, I know from talking to some people in Park City, they hate it. They really ran into to headaches. So I don't want to see us run into headaches. On the other hand, I want us to see us get some revenue if we can trade off a little bit of this for some commercial, so anyway, that's my principle. Just want some more information. That would be really helpful. And I know you've done a really good job so far. So if you can even point me to some information sources around this, that would be great.
I'll see what I can do. I'll pull it together.
thank you all for your insights and comments. It is a lot to think about there. Now we're going to move on to item 2. This is pretty straightforward, shouldn't take long. I'm going to turn it over to Polly to explain what this is all about.
This is as straightforward as it gets. Basically, we changed the code back in 21 to allow for an ALJ instead of a Board of Adjustment. But when we did it, we neglected to change the titles words as well. So that's all this is doing. So it's just to remove that legacy. I mean, because we're changing portions of the code, I just thought the cleanest way to do it was to do it through the council.
Any questions from council? It's basically the same language, the same intent, only we manage it through the use of an ALJ versus a BOA.
Yeah, let's get it cleaned up.
Thank you. All right, so if there are no questions from council, then I would need a motion to adopt an ordinance amending Title III to change the reference from the Board of Adjustment to Administrative Law Judge.
So moved. This is Chris.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bob. Carol,
Yes.
thank you, Sherry.
Yes,
Ralph,
Yes.
thank you, Bob
Yes.
and Chris.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. That is done. Thank you. Okay. The next item is a consideration possible approval of ordinance amending Hideout Municipal Code 7.18 to correct the time frame to clear snow from fire hydrants and to clarify snow plowing limitations. So when I was reviewing we were reviewing the code to see what we already had in here for language for snow clearing. And there's quite a lot of good stuff in our code. It kind of is in two different places in our code. There's a section 7 that talks about snow and snow plowing and snow removal and stuff like that. And there's a section 8. And when I was reviewing them, we found that the timeframes listed in the two sections weren't aligned. And so we wanted to go back and clean those up. I'm gonna share, if I can find, there's, there it is. Because it's in a Word document, so we can modify it. So are you seeing an ordinance amending Title 7.18 and 8.09 to correct the time frame to clear snow from hydrants and clarify snow plowing limitations?
We are.
Okay, thank you. So depending on which section of the code, we had two different time frames for clearing the hydrants. We had 72 hours in one and 16 hours in the other. So we got to pick, and we don't have to pick 16 or 72, but we have to pick a number and be consistent in both section 7 and section 8, so that they're aligned. So that's part one. For the information to council, and this is just amending the sections as opposed to looking at the whole code. If there is a hydrant on your property, you are required to clear it. That is the law. And if that doesn't happen, then the town, the HOA properties, the HOAs are contacted and they generally, at least, Tim can jump in and tell me, but in general, they've been reasonably good about trying to get to them. As soon as they can come up for air after a storm, which is why the 16 hours is a bit concerning. Because if you have 2 days of snow, no way you can get them all done while you're trying to clear streets and everything else. so that's something to think about. Cameron, I would suggest that this word is window. So. Is that the right word? Is that supposed to be?
Yeah, it's
Window?
windrow. It's when you put the two.
Oh, a windrow.
Windrow.
Okay,
Yeah, sorry, the D is probably not the right word.
gotcha.
Although I think it is the D.
Yeah, all right. So I understand what you're saying here. I'm sorry. It's a windrow, if you will. Okay, so that's anyway. So that's something that has to get done, and if it's not done, then we can we can cite people and charge for not doing that work, or charge them, cite them, but we also, I also don't want, if I have to hire somebody to do this, we want to get the cost covered, but I also, would prefer if residents and HOAs would take care of it. And so the idea would be to remind people, Carol's working on a newsletter. This is one of the things that I would want to put out as a reminder in the newsletter, that you got to dig them out at some point in time. So we can decide the time, but it needs to be done because it's a public safety thing. I mean, I plowed my hydrant out. It's not even my hydrant, the one across the street from me, because it's an empty lot. And then it snowed the next day and it was up over the top again. So it takes paying attention. But
Hey, so Mayor, hey, this is Chris. As far as the timeline, I have to admit, I struggled to get my own driveway clear. And I do eventually get to the hydrant if my neighbor doesn't get to it first, but I think we need to allow enough time to make it reasonable.
I agree.
Barry, I think 16 hours is not enough time. Like when I was sick and I had to clear my driveway, I probably took me 2 days to do something that should have taken a couple hours. So the other thing is, what do we do in the situation you mentioned? The hydrant is not even on your property. It's across the street on a undeveloped lot. Somebody owns that lot,
Yep.
but they don't live here.
Right.
So how are we handling that where it's not on a occupied property and it's not part of an HOA? How are we handling enforcement?
Holly, we talked about this. Maybe you can help me so I don't say something completely stupid here. But my sense is we would, we first notice we have a certain number of hydrants, 50, 100, whatever the number is. And so we would notice each and every person, every lot that has that. Other than the HOAs, no. So Overlook Village and Rustler and Shoreline, I mean, they know. So we don't have to do those. It's just the individual homeowner and empty lot type places. So it should be a reasonable number. We give them information, let them know that it's there and that it needs, they own, sadly they own land that needs to be addressed. Before I built my house, I would receive notices about weed mitigation. Right, I have a property in Golden Eagle where I received a notice this year about weed mitigation, and I hired a firm to do that. So these people can do that. But I know, Chris, you say
That's not practical, right? The person who owns the lot, actually, I don't know who owns this lot. I'm going to assume it's somebody who lives out of state who's not here. It's not practical that they're going to clear around that fire hydrant. It's going to be me or my neighbor or somebody who lives here.
So Polly, help me out here, but I think we decided that if we needed to do it, then we would say, okay, the town's gonna do that, but it's gonna cost you, $30 every time or whatever it is, $50 every time we have to do it in the course of the winter.
Yeah, that's a service the town could provide if we were willing to take that on. Or it could be, and if Cameron wants to jump in, I mean, if if someone gets a notice and they don't do it at all, then they're looking at a $200 fine based on our fee schedule for not abiding by the rules. I think what everyone's looking for is compliance. And you do have a situation here where there are many unbuilt lots that are interdispersed with built lots where the fire hydrants are important, so people do have to be responsible for them. So either people will violate and we'll fine them and then we can just remediate, or the town could consider paying to do it ourselves and getting people to prepay so we know how many we're doing, and we would find an amount that's, based on our cost and time and the service. I mean, that's or we could try, or people could try to find someone else to provide the service.
So Polly, I don't know how we as a town could provide the service. We can't even plow our roads curb to curb right now. How are we going to clear however many dozens of fire hydrants there are? It's not that easy, right? You need a snow blower, or you need a lot of elbow grease with a shovel. It's not easy. So I don't know how we can practically provide that service currently. Even if we had the money, even if we had the money from the, from the fines or whatever.
I would rely on Tim to respond to that and maybe we don't. It was just, and we're trying to get this done, right? So if we have to, just like if somebody leaves trash on their front yard and we have to remediate, it's not cost effective to have the town do it, but we'll do it because that's what our rules are.
So the people that are most impacted by the fire hydrants are the people that actually live here on the built properties, right? Because you want your fire hydrant in your area that's going to save your house from burning down. You want that fire hydrant cleared. Whether you have to do it or your neighbor does it or the person who owns it or the town, you want it cleared should there be an emergency. Because all those, many minutes that it might take the fire department to have to dig it out so they can connect would be lost, in an emergency. So it's in the best interest of everyone who resides here to make sure those fire hydrants are cleared. But, so the law that it's your responsibility if it's on your property, it probably works better if those properties are occupied. But it's not workable. I mean, how do we get compliance? How do we get people to band together and just clear around the fire hydrant in your neighborhood? Because you're the one who's going to suffer if the fire hydrant is not clear and you have an emergency.
Well, maybe it's something that the HOAs too could go and recognize that owners need to have this because it's a community service. Maybe there's a way to make it part of your HOA dues and the HOA hires someone and just does it all. Because, it's not, as you say, it's a health safety issue to not address this. So
yes,
Polly, I think we can address this in fees. It's a legitimate cost of safety in standby fees and in our water system. I think we can address it in a fee structure.
Okay, I don't think it's a standby fee.
No.
Yes, we can have a fee to.
Yes.
We can put in a fee to clear hydrants, but we would need to have a program so that we would know, so we could plan for it. But this is really a Tim question of, do we even have the resources to do that?
Right. I think it's to the level of when it's health and public safety as it is, that we can just work it into our fee structure and spread it over the entire town.
That part I agree with, Jan. I just, if there's, as Chris pointed out, I mean, the guys are busy trying to make the roads wide enough, let alone digging out hydrants. So,
Right.
If we make it whether we make it 72 hours or or, a week, I don't know if I don't know if they'll get there. So then what? How do we do that? We can't hire people that we want for the jobs we have now. So Tim, I don't know, jump in, but
I think we address it in our water structure, in our utilities.
now, I'm
It's
not talking
no,
about
no.
paying for it, Jan. I'm talking about the resources to do it. It's a whole different story. I can get paid for it. That part I'm not worried about. The question is who's going to do the work.
Yeah, and we have the equipment. Again, everybody's kind of hitting the nail on the head. It's the manpower that is going to be the problem for us right now to go ahead and get those cleared. So if we had extra manpower, like other cities do, they do that for their cities. But right now, for us, as everyone knows, it's a lack of manpower. We do have the equipment. We can actually run the mini to get it started and pull it out on both sides, and then that clears out a majority of the snow, at least on the sides, and then we're clearing the back, which is kind of the remainder. So we do have the equipment to do it. It's just a lack of manpower.
Who's actually checking to see if it's done now? Like who is actually monitoring whether these fire hydrants are dug out or not?
The public works team or engineering team are doing that. They have Tim sends out reminders to the HOAs for the HOA properties. As Chris mentioned, there are, there's local neighborhood stuff. I mean, as I say, I did the one across the street for me because I care. My house is there. Chris does the one, her neighbor do the one across from them because they care. So maybe it's just a communication package that we go out and encourage people to do that. I don't know. I just, we got to get them done one way or the other because, it's not that I'm not worried about so much about spread of fire in the winter because of the, with the snows on the ground and it doesn't transmit fire very well. But I am worried about that, it doesn't mean people don't have house fires and they need to be able to, the fire department, as Chris mentioned, needs to be able to get in there and help you put your house fire out.
I think
So-
we reach out to the county and ask this at the fire station level because it is health and public safety.
Well, I
And
mean,
ask
we
them
have
what,
the
Chris?
regulation. I think that what it comes down, it's a policy decision for the council. Do you want to just enforce this and start giving people notices and abating it because it's a health safety issue? Or do you want to provide a service from the town to take care of it now, or do you want to see if you can get the HOAs to do it? I mean, if people start getting $200 tickets, they're probably going to start figuring out a way to make sure that the hydrants are clear. But it's
So
a policy decision.
Holly, the county clears my fire hydrant in front of my house consistently, and I think we need to reach out to the county and find out what their regulation is.
Well, you're in Summit County and I'm in unincorporated Summit County, and they don't clear my hydrant. Me and our neighbors, well, not me, my husband clears it every storm. So
Yeah, I want to add that too. Lives in Jeremy Ranch. We had to clear it. Me and my neighbor, we just took turns clearing the hydrant that was between our property. County did not do it.
and that's what our regulation is in our code. So that's what we're requiring.
I mean, right now, the code is if it's on your property, you clear it. The county does not do that.
Yeah, I think that's the simplest thing, right? If it's on your property, you're on the hook, you're gonna get the fine, we're gonna collect money from you. And then meantime, I mean, that's just like the simplest way forward to try to get this to work. I think if we had a better relationship with our HOAs, for example, the Community Preservation Association, we might be able to approach them. They could collect money and then, see if they'd be willing to do it. But I sincerely doubt they'll do anything.
We'll ask. You can ask. I mean,
I think you
do
should.
it. They do it.
I think
for,
you should
they
give
do
it a
it
shot.
for their, they do it for their managed developments. So
Right. Okay. So we can give it a shot, but I do think, I guess the simplest thing is for us to just go after the homeowners where the Hydrants
So-
are located.
So I think, Chris, I think I'm looking at a hybrid here. So I think if they, if they are here and if people living there, then it's a pretty simple discussion.
Mhm.
Sorry, bad news, clear your hydrant. If they're not living here and they're willing to, they would like to do it, but unlike a pest control service, which you can call remotely and get somebody to come, I don't know if you can call a snowplow service and say, if it snows, come clear my hydrant, right? So maybe the hybrid is that in those cases, they agree to supplement, they pay a fee to the town. And, we get there when we get there. If the neighbors are like you and me, I may not want to wait for the town to get there and may clear it anyway, because my house is nearby.
Yep.
But there are some sections where these hydrants are really lonely. Although it's changing quickly because we got a lot of houses going in, but there are still some sections where the hydrants are lonely. And that may be where we have to help. I don't know. I'll talk with Tim about what it means to us. And, again, it's not so bad when we get a break between the storms. It's just, but I also want the guys to get some sleep because they're working hard.
So, you made a good point. So Mayor, if the hydrants are lonely, as you said, in other words, they're out in an undeveloped area where there aren't any houses around yet, and they would not be servicing for a house fire, do they even need to be dug out in the winter? Because, we're not going to have a, I think with all the snow on the ground.
I hear you, Chris. I think that in the case of a multi-alarm fire, they're going to multiple hydrants and dragging hoses distances and stuff. So if that's the next nearest hydrant to where they need to go, it would be nice if they could get to.
Okay, yeah, and I would agree. And maybe there might be a car fire they'd have to put out, and that's the closest hydrant, and it's stuck.
Yeah.
It's stuck and buried in snow. Yeah.
So I think we need to get to them all at some point. So that's the challenge here. So that's what we're trying to figure out. And maybe I can work with Tim and think about what but I'm also in agreement, although I told Cameron 16 hours, I was thinking about road clearance and not hydrants.
Yeah.
I don't think we can do the hydrants and
That's too restrictive, I think. I do my driveway, and then when I have enough energy, I go out and hit the
right.
hydrant.
Yeah. I was the same way. I spent 3 hours clearing out this morning and I just didn't have the energy to go across the street and dig it out to the next day.
Yeah, exactly. And then since we should know where all these hydrants are, right? Do we have a map?
Oh, yeah, they're all in our GIS, yeah.
Okay. So they could be prioritized, right? The ones
Yeah.
that are near structures need to be dug out. They would be the first ones. If the town had to remediate, go after those, and then eventually work your way over to the lonely ones.
Right. So, and to be fair, in some cases of where they are, we probably contribute to them being buried.
Yeah.
So,
When is this ordinance going to go into effect?
well, we already have this in effect, Carol. They're inconsistent in they're inconsistent timeframes in these two sections of our code. So one portion says 16 hours and the other portion says 72. So we just got to decide on a time and make them the same.
All right, if that's all we have to do, I think we should make it 72 hours. I think, we can't get perfection here, right? After
No.
a snowstorm,
Right.
you gotta do your driveway, you gotta get the roads clear so people can move around. And the fire hydrants are important, but getting in and out of your home or down the road is even more important. So I would give it the longer time frame, and I think 72 hours sounds reasonable.
And then I think, as I said, I'm going to do a communication on this. I think I'll work with Tim and I will work on figuring out with the guys how many hydrants are on unoccupied land. And then we'll figure out, if it's 6, it's one thing. If it's 60, it's another. So. And we may have to do some appeals. But let us look at that as well.
And if we picked 72 as the number of hours, can we check and see what the consistency of that with the county is? Do we know that number?
Cameron, can you look at some other codes and see what they're doing?
Yeah, I can look it up right now and see if I can find something before the end of the meeting if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be nice, Cameron, if there's something in the Wasatch County Fire District that you were looking up, in our same district.
Or Wasatch County in general, yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to that portion. So this is some new language. Although it's not in our code, it is in state code and county code. We keep being asked to lift up our plows when we drive by driveways, and we can't do that. We can't do that. We can't clear out the berm and get the roads clear. We can't do it. And we want to make sure people understand that it's not because we're mean and nasty. It's because you got to keep the plows moving for them to push the snow and get the roads backed up. And unfortunately, that process is a burn. So some of the HOAs have, like Rustler's HOA has a service to, clear out their driveways and share driveways and all. And, the timing, the HOA may come in the morning and clear it out, and then we'll come through and do another pass and put a berm back up. And then the HOA doesn't get back till later. And, I've gotten phone calls and emails, and there's every place I've ever been in, and I'm a northern person, right? I'm from the places that have winter. Towns don't clear your private property. I'm sorry. It can't be. We can't do it. And we want to put some languages to remind everybody that it's just coming to us and asking us to clear your berm. It's not going to happen. Can't do it.
Yep, I'm all for that. Mayor, I know this is a constant struggle, and it's not just here, it's everywhere. The struggle between the private snow removal companies and then the jurisdiction who's handling the public roadways. It's just always happens. I do sympathize for some homeowners who may not physically be able to move the snow that gets accumulated at the end of their driveway, because it is hard work. And I don't know if there's a program. I know that in Summit County, I think it was the sheriff's department, would come to certain, if you had an elderly resident, they would come and they would, work on your driveway. They'd come with a crew with a bunch of shovels and clear it, the end of your driveway, should you be in that situation. Because I saw it in the neighborhood that a family member lived in. But I don't know what else we can do. It is a constant push and pull, and you're entirely right. It's just it's a matter of timing of who gets there first and where the snow ends up, and then where it ends up again after the next pass. So I think it's important that we put this out there so everybody understands the end of your driveway. It is, unfortunately, you have to deal with it yourself.
Well, you got property, you manage, you support other municipalities that have the same issue up in the mountains. I assume that this has come up there as well. Polly, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it just gets done, but where I live, it's, there are residents, but it's the same as clearing the sidewalks, right? I mean, it's just a responsibility that has to be met.
I meant, what about Brighton's code or any of that? I mean,
I see what you're asking.
Yeah.
I think they do it, there's a lot, they're already very well established, built out communities. And that's part of their responsibilities. And even though they have 10,
Talking about the municipality, you're talking about the homeowners.
the homeowners.
Okay.
We can look into it. I do not believe that Brighton or Alta, that the fire districts there, I think it's up to the homeowners. I know that the municipality does not do it in either one.
Yeah. In the various places I've lived around here, I agree, Polly. Every place I've ever lived, you have to deal with the end of your
That's
driveway.
your driveway, yeah.
You got to deal with the end of your driveway. The town or city or county, they're going to go by with their plows at speed, and it's going to accumulate at the end of your driveway. You just have to deal with it. But like I said, there are some people who are physically unable to do that. I think they're just going to have to rely on friends and neighbors to help them.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can legislate anything to help them.
No, I mean, but there are services. People, not everybody plows their own driveway. I mean, I know that there are snow plows that we mentioned earlier. I mean, shoreline does not, the HOA does not clear the driveways in the shoreline. The homeowners do. Or they hire a service to do. So, Cameron, do you have any luck finding anything?
Yeah, nothing in Wasatch, but Summit is 72 hours. And that sounds pretty reasonable, I think. One other thing on the hydrants, I think when Tim is figuring out which ones to prioritize, it'd be good to talk with the fire district, because sometimes the fire department will need more than one hydrant for pressure, depending on the size of the fire. And so you may want to cluster, some that are around build outs.
Thanks, Cameron. That's really important information. So, okay. I think I totally agree with that.
Well, let's do 72 for now, and then we will if we learn anything different, then we will
So
come
I
back.
think, so I think what you're gonna do there, Cameron, is accept or decline those changes, and then you're gonna make the changes to 8.09. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the mayor making those changes. Sorry about that. Thank you.
It is. My secretarial skills are de minimis, but I'll get there. All right, the other thing is I'm gonna, now that we have the code aligned, we'll be publishing the code. Again, I highly recommend looking at it because there's a lot of good information in there about snow emergency, when you can park on the street, all that kind. We have lots of good language in our code that we need to do a better job of enforcing, but we have lots of good language in our code to enable the guys to do a better job. For example, you're not allowed to be parked on the street between midnight and 7 a.m. You're not allowed to be parked on the street, period. But, particularly because those are the hours that these guys are hoping to see the roads clear so they can push hard. But our code also says, and the next day. So part of our problem is that our construction folks are coming in the next day, even though it snowed, and making it impossible for us to get a plow through there. Well, our code says they can't be there. So, I gotta work with Tim and Dan and figure out how we're gonna, and TO, and figure out how we're gonna get these guys to not be here on the day after 2 feet of snow, parking on the side of the road, so these guys can't get in there.
Shouldn't we engage the sheriff's department to come and help us with
Yeah, we're
parking
empowered to
enforcement
do all
on
that.
those days?
Yeah, we're empowered to do all that.
Well, we
And
should
get them
start
to
doing
chase
that.
them out. But we'd like to tell them first before we start chasing them out, saying, guys, you can't be here the day after a heavy snow, period. You need to tell your crews, you need to let them know they can't come to work that day. I'm sorry.
Or they have to find a way to park.
Or they have to
off
find
the
and get
street.
there without parking. Yeah.
Get there, shovel a spot or whatever, clear a
Yeah,
spot.
get
park
off the road. Yeah. Get in the
Exactly.
driveways, whatever. Exactly.
We need to do that because it's
Yeah.
crazy. It is
Yeah.
insane, actually.
Yeah, it
The
is.
roads are already narrow and then you got all this construction traffic.
Yep. No, it's
And the
deadly.
roads are icy and we just have to start enforcing this.
Right. So the code, it's not the code. The code is pretty darn good, actually. I mean, I went through this with Cameron on the phone the other day. I mean, we got a lot of good language in there. We gotta be very much more aggressive around making sure the word gets out and enforcing it. And we have, yes, and we have a relationship with the sheriff's department and we can use that, Chris. But I totally support that, but I at least want to say, let me at least tell each of the major builders at each of these locations, this is the deal. And if the cars are here, we're going to get them pulled.
Are you going to reach out to any active construction site
Yeah, absolutely.
or all, I should say, all active construction
All
sites?
active construction sites. And
Yep.
I think, and Tim will do this, we'll add this to our pre-construction meetings because each of these jobs have to come through us before they get to start. And we'll make sure that we're announcing it to them. If your guys are there during a storm or after a storm, they're out of here.
Okay.
If they don't leave, we'll yank them.
So, yeah, no, that sounds nice. And but you know how it works, right? They have different subs and different days and the word doesn't always get out to
Right,
the
and
guys.
different guys come from different, one day it's
Exactly.
plumber A, one day it's the different guy from the same plumbing company.
Look, I think we've got to have a policy in place and an enforcement. I mean, every one of the permits has the name of the construction, contact on it. We should be calling them as soon as we see cars that are accumulating on the side of the road after a snowstorm for a construction site. And we give them fair warning, hey, tell your guys they have to move their vehicles, or you have to get out here, clear some space somewhere, remove the snow so they can park off the street. And we're going to give you X amount of time to do it. Otherwise, then we're going to call the sheriff and we're going to start enforcing our parking regulations. And then, because honestly, we don't want to tow people's cars, and we just want them to get them off the road.
Agreed.
I have a
So-
question about the mailboxes.
Yeah.
Like I went to pick up some mail and there were 2 other cars parked to get their mail. And what do we do about people that all of a sudden there's a bunch of people getting their mail and they're clogging the road? Because it used to be at least the cluster mailboxes for Shoreline. And I think other people use them too. I think Mary, you also use them.
No,
That you get a traffic jam around the mailboxes. Do we just try to hope that everybody's polite and that they run and get their mail and get back in their car and move it?
I mean, it's typically pretty short-term, Carol. It's, some portions of Shoreline have areas where they can pull the cars off that they're not blocking the roadway. The one on the corner of Shoreline and Longview, Shoreline 1 doesn't really have a great space. I think, Thomas, if you're still on, we should probably build that into our thinking for when we're talking to developers, that they need to have like a decel lane, if you will, a pullover lane where you can get a couple of cars in front of the mailbox to hop out and get the mail. I know up here by the town hall where I am and my mailbox is, people, there's room on this little town street to do that, although it's pretty narrow right now. The HOAs are supposed to clear the mailboxes. That's part of the HOA responsibility. It doesn't always happen. So I know, I talked to the postmaster this week, and she reminded me to ask if we could remind everybody that does the clearing to do a better job, particularly the ones that have wraparound, like Rustler has boxes, back to back, and generally they can get to the front side, they can't get to the back side because the snow gets piled up behind it. So we'll add that to our communication package as well to the HOAs. But I don't know, Carol. I don't know that it's almost impossible to manage because you never know when people are going to be there. But
Right.
generally, they're not hanging out there. They get out, get their mail, get in the car, and go. Sometimes they see somebody they haven't seen in a while and decide to have a social moment. But we can request in our notice. We can maybe make mention of, please don't congregate in cars at the mailbox because you're blocking the road in the wintertime. Just get your mail and keep moving and find someplace else to have your social moment.
Mayor, can we talk a little bit more about enforcement? I know I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but what are we really doing? Like every time I don't drive around a lot that much, but when I do, I have to go past several construction sites. And more often than not, there are cars in the road in front of the property. And the roads are just too narrow right now. Plus it's winter. We have winter parking regulations that we pass. What are we actually going to do about it? Because, every time I drive by, of course, I swear under my breath, I think about, should I get out of the car and talk to him? And then I think, well, who's supposed to be enforcing this? And then what are we exactly enforcing? Are we going to give them a warning? Hey, you got 2 hours to get your vehicles off the road. Otherwise, I'm calling the sheriff. They're going to start doing tickets. And then if you don't move them, they're going to get towed. But what are we actually going to do? What can we tell people in the town that we're going to do about this problem?
I think that's a really good question, Chris. And I don't know that I have the answer just yet. As I mentioned, when I went through the code language with Cameron and then looked at it, I started by looking at it, then talked to Cameron about it and so forth, and saw what's in there. I think we've got to sit down. The guys don't, they don't go through town, especially, they don't necessarily have the wherewithal to catch every time a guy shows up at a job site, right? So, we've got to communicate with builders. We got to tell them that. We've got to, so let Tim and I do some work and put some language together, and we'll share it with the council and see what you think about the communication. We'll work on
that sounds great, but does that mean we have to wait a month? It's now
No,
going to be
no. I'm going to issue it. We're going to issue it anyway, but at least I'll get some input from you.
Okay.
Via email. This is not a, what's the right word? We have the code, so it's enforcement, not the code, and we have an enforcement mechanism. So this is a legislative type, is it legislative? What is this? It's administrative type language. So we don't have to have a council vote, but I would appreciate some thoughts on it. So we'll put some language together over the next 48 hours or so, and then get it out there to you guys, and hopefully by Monday we'll start communicating.
Yeah, no, it's great. In the non-winter months, it's just annoying and irritating.
Yeah.
But in the winter, it is actually dangerous. It's dangerous. It's a health and safety issue. And every time, it's very, very bad out there right now. We need to get on this now as best, do what you can. I don't know how you can change their behavior except unfortunately,
Make 'em.
by
Yeah.
threatening them and then towing their cars and then finding them or whatever, whatever we're gonna do, we need to start doing it.
I agree. It's gotten to, unfortunately, we've had so much snow and so much coming. The guys can barely keep up with getting the roads clear. So we'll, we need the help from these guys. They've got to do their job. So I noticed when I was coming up Longview today, I was coming up past your, from the roundabout past your place, Chris. And they had the houses on the right-hand side going towards Rustler. They had dug out a lot and pushed a lot back. So those builders, some builders are doing what they need to do. The shoreline guys, particularly down in Deer Waters, are not.
Yeah.
You go out that way, you can't even get out.
I'm gonna argue, what you just mentioned on Longview. They are digging out. I watched them with the Mini X today on one of the properties and the other property. I saw them snow blowing and making an attempt, but it's still unsafe. Even though they've done that, it's not enough
Agreed.
to get them off the road because our ordinance says you can't park on the road. I mean, you can't have either any wheels on the road.
Yeah. So Tim, we'll add that to our list for tomorrow. All right, coming back to this, if we're okay with the 72 hours and the new language we talked about and the changes I made here, or unmade here, I would like to see if I can get a motion to approve an ordinance amending Title 7.18 and 8.09 to correct the time frame, to clear the snow from hydrants, and to clarify snow plowing limitations as modified this evening. Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll move.
Sure,
This is
I'll
Chris. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, Chris
Sure.
is moving.
Yeah, I'll second it. And I wanted just to add that I think we really need to advertise this or, put it out and
Yeah.
distribute it properly so it's got to get up on our website, on any apps that we have. And
Yeah.
just especially the fire hydrant piece so that we fairly communicate to the homeowners or absentee homeowners or whatever. And that's my only thing at this point, as and the contractors, I think we, just better enforcement. So I'm seconding it with just
Thank you,
those
Ron.
couple of comments.
Thank you. All right. Bob Newberg,
Yes,
you support this? Yes, thank you.
yes,
Carol, you support this motion for this?
Yes.
Thank you. Sherry,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Chris. Chris?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Motion passes, ordinance is approved, and so I started writing the communication package last night, but I ran out of steam, so we'll do some more work on it and get you something to look at over the next 24 hours or so we can get the word out. Okay. So that brings us back to the agenda. We don't, to the best of my knowledge, unless Paula, you have something, we don't have a need for a closed executive session from a legal standpoint. And we have no personnel matters or real property discussions to have this evening. So unless you got something, Paula, we'll skip the executive.
Sounds good. I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you. In that case, if the council is willing, I would like a motion to close the meeting and call it a night.
I'll move.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry.
I'll second.
Thank you, Carol. Bob,
Aye.
Ralph,
Yes.
thank you. I know it's late where you are. And Carol, Carol,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Sherry.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you all. Be safe, and we'll see you next month. In the meantime, we'll get a lot more aggressive on the snow stuff in the meantime. Okay. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.